Welcome back, everybody. My name is Tim, and this is another Real Ideal Gear review. Today we're going to be looking at the Rudland Vintage Chronograph. This is an AliExpress watch that is got some great features, great design qualities to it, but there's some significant issues that I've experienced with this particular watch. Not necessarily all watches, I'm sure, will have these same issues. Yeah, it's going to be a tough review for this watch, but there's plenty of good things about this watch too. So if you've ordered one and you've had really good success with it, or you're looking at getting one of these, you may get lucky. So let's get started with the 5 things that I typically go through, which are size, fitment, finish, accuracy, and then legibility and lume. So starting off with size, this is a kind of a typical sports style chronograph watch, stainless steel integrated bracelet. It's got some heft to it. It's definitely a average sized watch. So it's going to fit your average to above average, maybe large wristed person down to even not necessarily really small wrist, but you know, if you have a maybe between average and small sized wrist, so average small, I'm not sure what the term is, but those all will fit. The proportions on this are great. I love the design, and it does a great job. Let's take a look at the fitment. The fitment is where things kind of go a little bit sideways. So this has an integrated bracelet, and if you look at the clasp doesn't have any micro adjusts. So all the adjusting comes through the links on the bracelet. I got lucky, and it actually fits with the links that I took out. And I've heard that a few times from other reviewers on this watch, but I also think that there's going to be some reviewers or some folks who've bought this watch that say it's too tight or too loose because all you have to work with are the links in the bracelet. It looks great. I love the overall design of it. I love the way that it feels on the wrist. I don't think it's too top heavy. I think the bracelet helps balance everything out. The fitment is great on the wrist, and the bracelet is kind of it's not a real form-fitting bracelet on your wrist. So this one does have you have to tolerate a little bit of I don't know, arching of the bracelet around the wrist in certain areas on your wrist. So to me, I think it works great. And again, integrated bracelet works really fine. So let's go to finish, and this is where this watch comes off the rails. Okay. Great dial, love the sunburst dial, love the color, love the handset, the bright white on the hands, and even the chronograph second hand is a brighter white because it's a different lume. So there's lume on the hour hand, the minute hand. There's also a different color lume on the chronograph second hand, the big second hand in the middle. So all of that is great. The sub dials are great, white hand on a dark background. So the finish to me is awesome. The polished bezel, you've got the tachometer around the inside of the bezel underneath the sapphire crystal. You've got polished pushers. You've got a nice good sized crown. It's got some good grip to it, and it doesn't stick out too much either. So all of those controls on the 3 o'clock side I think are done really well. Here's where it goes off the rails. If you look at the 1 o'clock top case portion of this watch, there's some milling that still exists on the case. And I don't know if anybody out there has ever seen this before. This is the first time of all the AliExpress watches that I have where there is actual milling marks still on here that supersede the brushed finish. Okay, so that's one piece on here that it's just a complete head scratcher because it stands out. I looked at this as like, is that something that like grease or some kind of dirt or something like that? So I took a cloth, tried wiping it off, and sure enough, it's actually milling. So the milling on this is, so that's one big issue. Going back to the fitment, the clasp is defective. I have a hard time getting this clasp off my wrist or opening up the clasp to get the watch off my wrist. So there's something on the inside when it comes to the mechanism with the springs that is not allowing the collars to widen out away from the ball and pin. You end up with a watch that's stuck on your wrist, and I'm moving it back and forth. I'm trying to put pressure on, take pressure off the clasps, and find out a way to make this all work. And it literally takes me a couple of minutes to get this clasp off. I've contacted Rudland through AliExpress, and I've expressed my concerns so far. And what I've gotten back is, well, you'll have to open up a dispute. And I says, okay, so how do I open up a dispute? No response. So the frustration is beginning to grow as a person who enjoys their watches. I enjoy what they put out. I love the design, and I want to have a successful experience with them. But at the same time, it's not working out, not only on the watch end, but also on the customer service end at this point. So I'm going to keep trying. One other thing about the finishing, the chronograph second hand. When I hit the start button at the 2 o'clock position, when I hit that pusher, the second hand starts ticking. Right after about 5 seconds, it's off. And it gets worse as it goes past the 10-second mark down to the 15-second mark. It's between the second markers. Oddly enough, when it gets down to 28, 29 seconds, the bottom end, the bottom side of the dial, it goes right back to being on point, all the way back to 60, which is the strangest thing. So when I messaged Rudland about this, I said, you know, the second hand on the chronograph is off. And they said, well, what you do is you take the crown, pull it all the way out, and then use the 2 o'clock pusher to move the chronograph second hand around the dial. So I started doing that thinking there was some kind of micro adjust in there. It's not a micro adjust. It moves it 1 second at a time in case your starting position is off by 1 second or 2 seconds or 3 seconds. You can make that adjustment, which is actually pretty cool. But it doesn't resolve my issue, which is it's off basically from the 5-second mark all the way down to the 30-second mark between the markers, and then it gets right back on mark from 30 to 60. So I'm another head scratcher. So I've got 3 major issues with this watch that I'm not getting any help at this point from Rudland when it comes to resolving the issues. So lume on this watch is poor. It's a sport watch. It's a low-cost AliExpress watch. I don't have a lot of expectations with it, but just know that it's poor. It lasted about 2 minutes before the camera couldn't focus on the hands. So that is always an indication that the camera is working way too hard to try to expose and keep up with the focusing on the hands. So when I checked it after about 4 minutes, it was pretty dang low. So this is not a watch that's going to last all night. It does have lume, and it will last maybe 3-4 minutes. If that's okay with you, then this watch is for you. The legibility of this watch is great. The contrast of the dial and the hands is awesome. They're bright, white-filled hands. I mean, these hands really stand out. The hour hand, the minute hand, and with the chronograph second hand at the 12 o'clock position until you start using it, it's kind of out of the way in a way. I love the contrast. I love the dial. I love the design. I love the pushers on here. I love everything about this watch. There's some execution issues with the quality control of this watch. So overall score of this watch is a 7.8 out of 10. It's not even a not recommend. It is a buyer beware. This is I don't know how else to tell you that when you buy a watch like this from Rudland, you may or may not get a watch that you actually like. You may or may not get a watch that you can take on or off, and you may or may not get a watch that the chronograph second hand is lined up all the way around. Even if it was misaligned for 60 seconds and I could adjust it a little bit, that's one thing. But this is like half one side is off, half the other side is off. Like, this makes no sense to me whatsoever. So I'm still working with Rudland to try and get an exchange, and maybe the exchange will bring in one that's great. And there you go. It won't be a buyer beware. It's just going to be, I'm not going to recommend it, but just know that, you know, it's possible. So right now it is worse than worse than not recommended. This is buyer beware. My experience has been poor. The customer service part of this has been poor. I provided everything they've asked for, and I still don't have a resolution to this. So there you go. 7.8 out of 10. I like it, but I'm struggling massively with a few things. So my name is Ben Tim. My name is Tim. It will always be Tim. This is another Real Ideal Gear review. We'll catch you guys next time.